Thank you for clicking on this video. This video tells the story of some research that I completed and published earlier this year in 2014. And that research was derived from data I collected over a 2-year period working with senior teams who, for the period of time I was working with them, became what's called an action learning set. That is, they came together to solve problems and learn while they did that. The title of the paper is called Leaders Behaving Badly, because while I was watching and observing these various senior teams who'd become a set while I was working with them, I noticed a especially important dynamic that recurred in various meetings of theirs over that whole period. So this is it. What happened is this. Leaders in particular did certain things which created tension in the room. And that tension happened usually outside of the awareness of the leader. And the leader was behaving in ways that it was often unintentional, but created angst. And then that angst became hard to talk about and even difficult for the rest of the room to raise as a topic. In effect, what caused was undiscussables. So this paper is about how leaders behave badly. I use that term rather loosely, but how leaders create undiscussables and usually do it without knowing they're doing it. So there were 3 ways that they did this. The first is this. It's a simple one, but it can happen so easily. Leaders closed down conversations unilaterally. They made a decision. Usually they would consider themselves as making the decision for the group's good, but ultimately closed down discussion and moved it on to something else. And sometimes they did it saying, I'd like to take this conversation offline. The trouble is, what they hadn't quite realized is that no one else in the room had the power to do that. It was only they who could naturally and easily, even casually say, I think we'll move on. It was the leader exercising that power without acknowledging that no one else in the room had that power to do that, which created angst in the room. That created frustration. And those in the room, those others in the team, often then struggled to talk about the leader's pattern of closing down conversations. And the leader was doing it usually without acknowledging or understanding that they were exercising significant power to do it, and that everyone else in the room knew that nobody else could do that except the leader. That was the first way that undiscussables were created, topics which were too hard to raise. The second is this. Leaders tended to feel more free to get frustrated, to get even angry, to express their irritation with someone, and to do that more freely. Now, the leader may consider themselves as just being authentic at those moments. But here's the challenge. Very few people or no one else in that team or meeting felt they had the right or sufficient rank to get angry at the boss, and usually even at one another. In effect, the only one that seemed to have the right to get angry when they wanted to was the boss. Once again, the boss was utilizing or exercising terrific power without acknowledging they were. That is, they were getting angry at people, frustrated with things. Why? Where is this? Why isn't this here now? Without acknowledging that no one else in the room quite had the rank sufficient to give them the freedom of expressing their anger. Once again, it was leaders exercising power outside their awareness or without acknowledgement that created angst in the rest of the room and ultimately created undiscussables. That is, topics which were hard to raise. That was the second way leaders did this. And you'll notice both ways so far rest on the notion that where leaders exercise power without acknowledgement or awareness, it tends to upset others. And of course we know that, and I'm indebted to the work of Arnie Mindell for this, who among other many power theorists have brought this particular aspect of exercising power to our attention. So what was the third way that leaders tended to behave badly and ultimately create angst in the rest of the room or in the rest of their team? That was this, where leaders exercised detachment, where they became remote and removed themselves from the angst of those people who might need something from them. And because they have the rank to do it, because they're not so personally touched by the needs of the people who may desperately need something, and they're affected by not getting whatever they want, but the leader isn't so touched by it, then the leader can easily move on, become remote, and even disconnect from it. And when the leader did that, they did not acknowledge that that was extraordinary power they were exercising, a power that those in the rest of the room who needed something desperately didn't have available to them. In this case, quite a few of the scenarios were where the team itself was waiting or needing resources or a response from someone outside the group. And that person outside the group was not responsive to the persistent and repetitive demands the group was making. So the person outside the group was exercising power by becoming remote and detaching themselves to the needs of the group. How could they do that? Because those needs weren't their own. They could go home and forget about it. But this team, there was much resting on getting those resources. And when the person who's holding those resources exercises the power to become remote or detached, and does so without realizing that they have this extraordinary rank which enables them to do that, then the people in the team get frustrated. They get upset. That's the source of such angst, such irritation, and ultimately, once again, undiscussables, topics which are too hard to raise. So, if you're listening to this video, I'd now invite you to reflect on the power that you have. Where does your rank reside? And how can you live in that rank more consciously, with more awareness? And where you do that, you're less likely to create angst on the other side.